as Ada entered her house, she paused, only to hear a piercing scream from her mother. The sound comes from the bathroom, where she finds her mother clutching her leg in pain, tears streaming down her face. Her newborn baby, Kamsi, lies limp on the tiled floor, his small frame eerily still. "Mama, what did you do?" Ada shouted, grabbing the baby, shaking with terror. Blood trickles from a small wound on his head. "What did you do to my baby?" Mama Ada, panicked and crying, stammered, I was only tossing him up, like we did with you. I didn't mean for this. My leg cramped. I didn't mean to drop him." Ada barely hears her mother's word. She already racing to the car, Kamsi cradled in her arms, praying, pleading for him to wake up. At the hospital, the doctors rushed Kamsi into emergency care, but Ada's gut churned with dread. She fears she already knows the answer. What truly happened to Kamsi? How did it come to this? Can the baby survive this? What role did Mama Ada's tradition played in this? Years ago, Ada was sitting by the window, watching the rain fall in soft, steady drop. The sound of water hitting the roof reminded her of the countless nights she had cried herself to sleep. For 8 good years, she and her husband, Chike, had been trying to have a child, but nothing worked. Each month, she hoped, she prayed and waited for signs that she was pregnant. Each time, she was disappointed. The whispers from family and friends had started early in their marriage. At first, people were kind, asking casually, "When will the baby come?" But as the years passed, the questions became sharper, almost like accusations. "Is everything okay with you and Chike?" Some family members began to suggest traditional remedies. Ada's mother-in-law once brought a bottle of herbs, telling her to drink it every morning before sunrise. "This worked for a woman in my village," she had said with confidence. Ada had smiled politely, but never touched the concoction. She never believed in such things. Then, there were aunties who insisted she visited a certain priest who was known for blessing every woman's womb. They said he could solve any problem, no matter how difficult. Just one visit, they urged her. What's the harm? Ada refused every time. She did not see how drinking strange potions or praying in secret shrines could solve what doctors couldn't explain. But the pressure was constant, and it weighed heavily on her. She felt like a failure, like something was wrong with her body, even though every test showed that she was healthy. Chike tried to be strong for her, but Ada could see the sadness in his eyes too. He avoided family gatherings now because he didn't want to hear the comments about how men were meant to be fathers. Once his uncle had pulled him aside and said, "Maybe you should take another wife. Sometimes the problem is the woman." That night, Chike had come home and held Ada close. "Don't listen to them," he whispered. "You are enough for me. We will get through this together." His words gave her comfort, but deep down, Ada knew he was hurting too. The weight of their culture was heavy on their shoulders. In their community, having children wasn't just a personal joy. It was a duty. People believed that a marriage wasn't complete without children. No matter how successful a couple was, if they didn't have kids, they were seen as incomplete. Ada often wondered why people couldn't just let them be. Why couldn't they understand that this wasn't something she or Chike could control? But tradition was so strong, and expectations were louder than their quiet pain. This beautiful morning, Ada and Chike sat in the doctor's office again. It was their 5th visit in 2 years. By now, they knew the routine, tests, questions, and then the same frustrating conclusions. There is no medical reasons why you shouldn't be able to conceive, the doctor said, just like he always did every time they visited him. But this time, the doctor added something new, something different. He leaned forward, his tone gentle but serious. Have you considered IVF, he said. Ada looked at Chike, confused. What is IVF, she asked. It stands for in vitro fertilization, the doctor explained. It's a process where we help fertilize eggs outside your body and then place them back into your womb. It's a way to bypass any issue that might be stopping you from getting pregnant naturally. Ada felt a flicker of hope, but it was quicker overshadowed by doubt. Does it work? She asked. It's not guaranteed, the doctor admitted, but it gives many couples like you a chance they wouldn't have otherwise. The main challenge is that it can be very expensive. The word expensive hit Ada like a punch. She and Chike weren't poor, but they didn't have a lot of extra money either. How expensive? Chike asked cautiously. The doctor gave them a figure, and Ada felt her heart sink. It was more than they had in their savings, more than they could afford without making sacrifices. She looked at Chike again, and she could see the wheels turning in his mind. That night, they talked about it for hours. Chike was determined. If this is our only chance, we have to take it, he said. But how? Ada asked. We don't have that kind of money. We will find a way, Chike said firmly. We will save, we will work harder, we will cut back on everything we can. Ada, we've waited long enough. This is our time. Ada nodded slowly. She wanted this too. She wanted it more than anything in the world. And if Chike was willing to fight for it, then so was she. Over the next few months, their lives changed completely. Chike started working overtime at his job, coming home late almost every night. Ada took on a side business, selling clothes and accessories online. They stopped eating out, cancelled their cable subscription, and even sold some of their furniture to add to their savings. It was exhausting, but it gave Ada hope. Every time she deposited money into their special IVF account, she felt like they were one step closer to their dream. When the day finally came to start the IVF process, Ada was both excited and terrified. The injections were painful and the procedures were uncomfortable, but she endured it all because she knew what was at stake. After the embryo transfer, the doctor told her she had to wait 2 weeks before taking a pregnancy test. Those 2 weeks felt like the longest time of her life. Ada couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, and couldn't think about anything else. She prayed every morning and every night, asking God to make this work. When the day finally came, Ada held the pregnancy test in her shaking hands. Chike sat beside her, just as nervous. They watched the stick closely, waiting for the results. Then it happened. 2 pink lines appeared. Ada gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Chike, it worked! It worked! She cried. Chike pulled her into his arms and they both began to cry. It was a miracle. After years of waiting and hoping and enduring so much pain, they were finally going to be parents. The pregnancy wasn't easy, but Ada didn't mind. Every kick, every craving, and even the nausea felt like a blessing to her. When Kamsi was born, Ada looked at him and knew it had all been worth it. He was perfect, her miracle baby, her answer to her prayers. Ada sat on the edge of her bed, cradling baby Kamsi in her arms. He had just finished feeding and was drifting off to sleep, his tiny hand gripping her fingers. She felt a wave of love so strong that it brought tears to her eyes. This was what she had prayed for, dreamed of, and worked so hard to achieve. Yet, at the back of her mind, she couldn't help but feel overwhelmed. The sleepless nights, the constant feeding, and her own slow recovery from childbirth were taking a toll on her. When her mother, Mama Ada, called to say she was coming for omugwo, Ada felt a mixture of relief and anxiety. Omugwo was a tradition deeply rooted in their culture, where a new mother's mother or mother-in-law came to care for the newborn baby and help the mother recover. It was supposed to be a time of rest and bonding, but Ada knew her mother so well. Mama Ada was strong-willed and deeply attached to her traditional ways. When Mama Ada arrived, she brought with her 2 large bags. One was filled with clothes and gifts for the baby, and the other was packed with items Ada hadn't seen in years. Dried herbs, jars of oil, and other things Ada couldn't even name. "My daughter," Mama Ada said with a wide smile, pulling Ada into a hug. "You've done so well. Look at this strong boy. He will grow to be a great man." She leaned over to look at Kamsi, clicking her tongue in admiration. "Thank you, Mama," Ada said, smiling. She was genuinely happy to see her mother, but she couldn't ignore the small knot of tension in her chest. From the moment Mama Ada set down her bags, she took charge. She insisted on cooking for Ada, making large pots of pepper soup with herbs she said would clean her body and speed up her recovery. She showed Ada how to wrap her stomach tightly with a long cloth to help her regain her figure. At first, Ada was grateful. She could rest more, and her mother's cooking filled the house with comforting smells that reminded her of her childhood. But it didn't take long for Mama Ada's enthusiasm to become overbearing. One morning, Ada was sitting on the couch, breastfeeding Kamsi, when Mama Ada walked in with a jar of oil and a small wooden comb. She sat down beside Ada and said, "Let me show you how to massage him properly." Ada raised an eyebrow. "Massage him? He's fine, Mama. He's just eating." "Yes, but he needs a proper massage to grow strong," Mama Ada said, already reaching for Kamsi. "When we were raising you, we did this every day. That's why you grew tall and healthy." Reluctantly, Ada handed Kamsi over, watching nervously as her mother began to rub oil onto his tiny arms and leg. At first, it seemed harmless, just gentle strokes up and down his body. But then, Mama Ada started bending his leg backwards, folding them at the knees and pressing them towards his back. "Mama, stop!" Ada said, alarmed. "What are you doing?" "This is how we did it in our time," Mama Ada said, undeterred. "It will make his legs straight and his bones strong. Don't you want him to walk early?" Ada's heart raced as she watched her mother fold Kamsi's arms and legs in ways that didn't look natural. "Mama, he's just a baby. His bones are still soft. You will hurt him." "Nonsense," Mama Ada said dismissively. "I raised you and your brothers this way, and you all turned out fine." Ada wanted to argue, but she didn't know how to explain what she felt. She had read books and spoken to her doctors, and she knew this wasn't right. But in their culture, questioning an elder was seen as disrespectful, especially when it came to child rearing. Ada sighed and decided to let it go, thinking it was a one-time thing. But it wasn't. Every morning after Kamsi's birth, Mama Ada repeated the massage ritual, and every time, Ada felt a pang of anxiety in her chest. She tried to speak up again, but her mother brushed her off. "You young people think you know everything," Mama Ada said. "You should trust your mother. I've been doing this longer than you've been alive." The tension in the house reached a new level. One evening, when Kamsi was crying non-stop, Ada had tried feeding him, changing his diapers, and rocking him to sleep, but nothing seemed to work. She was exhausted and on the verge of tears herself when Mama Ada walked in. Let me see him, Mama Ada said, holding out her arms. Ada hesitated but handed Kamsi over. Mama Ada examined him, her experienced eyes scanning him from head to toe. He's fine, she said confidently. He just needs a little help to calm down. Before Ada could ask what she meant, Mama Ada reached into her bag and pulled out a small jar of aboniki balm. The strong minty smell filled the room as soon as she opened it. Mama, what are you doing with that? Ada asked, her voice rising. This will help him breathe better, Mama Ada said, dipping her fingers into the balm. She began rubbing it on Kamsi's chest and under his nose. Mama, stop, Ada said, rushing forward. That's too harsh for a baby. His skin is sensitive and he's too young for something like this. Mama Ada sighed heavily, as if Ada was the one being unreasonable. You don't understand, she said. This is what we used for you when you were a baby. It clears the chest and helps with cold. You've forgotten where you came from. Ada was furious. Mama, I don't care what you use for me. The doctor said no strong substance on his skin, and I told you that. But Mama Ada only shook her head. Doctors don't know everything, my daughter. Trust me, Ada. I know what I'm doing. Ada grabbed Kamsi and gently wiped the balm off his chest with a clean cloth, her hands shaking with anger and fear. She didn't want to fight her mother, but she couldn't stay quiet anymore. Mama, this is my child, and I will decide what's best for him. Please, no more balm. Mama Ada looked hurt, but said nothing. Ada felt a pang of guilt, but she pushed it aside. She had to protect her son, even if it meant standing up to her mother. The days in the house seemed to stretch longer, and the air grew heavier with each passing moment. Ada was becoming more anxious, watching her mother continue with practices that made her deeply very uncomfortable. At first, she tried to reason with herself, thinking, maybe Mama is right. She raised me and my siblings and we turned out fine. But every time she saw her mother massage Kamsi's tiny arms and legs or apply the strong smelling balm, her instincts screamed that this wasn't right. Kamsi began crying more often, his small body wriggling in discomfort. Ada noticed the little rash on his chest where the balm had been applied and the way he winced when anyone touched his legs. She voiced her concern to Chike one evening when they finally had a moment alone. I don't know what to do, Ada whispered, tears gathering in her eyes. I've told Mama to stop, but she won't listen. And Kamsi, he doesn't seem okay. Chike sighed heavily, rubbing his temples. You know how she is, Ada. She means well, but she's stubborn. Maybe you just need to talk to her again calmly this time. Ada shook her head. I've tried. She thinks I'm being ungrateful, like I don't trust her. But this is my child. I can't just sit back and let her keep doing these things. Chike pulled her into a hug, his voice soft. I know it's hard, Ada, but maybe she just needs more time to adjust. You know how elders are with their traditions. They think it's the only way. But Ada didn't think time will help. The tension between her and her mother was growing like a storm cloud, dark and ominous, ready to break at any moment. One morning, Ada woke up to find that her mother had already bathed Kamsi before she got out of bed. She rushed to the bathroom and found her mother holding Kamsi, his little legs folded backward as her mother continued her usual massage routine. Mama, I told you to stop doing that, Ada shouted, her voice shaking with anger. Her mother looked up, startled but unapologetic. Ada, this is for his own good now. You worry too much. Do you think I don't love my grandson? I want him to grow strong and healthy. Ada felt her frustration boil over. I'm his mother, Mama. I decide what's best for him, not you. For the first time, Mama Ada looked hot. She placed Kamsi gently on the bed and stood up. You are speaking to me like this because you've forgotten who I am, she said quietly. I raised you, Ada. I sacrificed everything for you. And now, you think you know better than me. The words stung, but Ada refused to back down. I respect you, Mama, but this is not about you. This is about Kamsi. Please, just listen to me for once. Mama Ada said nothing, but the silence between them was thick and heavy. It happened on a sunny afternoon when Ada decided to step out for some errands. Before leaving, she turned to her mother, her tone firm but polite. Mama, please don't bet Kamsi today. I'll do it when I get back. Her mother nodded but said nothing, and Ada felt a small sense of relief. Maybe her mother was finally starting to listen to her. But as she walked back into the house an hour later, Ada heard a loud cry from the bathroom. Her heart sank, dropping her bags. She rushed inside, her sandals slapping against the floor. The sight that greeted her stopped her in her tracks. Mama Ada was sitting on the bathroom floor, clutching her legs and crying out in pain. Kamsi was lying on the floor beside her, eerily still. Mama Ada screamed, rushing to pick up her baby. His small body felt limp in her arms, and there was a red mark on his forehead. What happened? What did you do? I was just bathing him, Mama Ada stammered, tears streaming down her face. I did everything like I always do, but my leg cramped and I couldn't catch him. You dropped him? Ada shrieked, her voice breaking. I told you not to bathe him, Mama. I told you to stop all of this. Mama Ada was sobbing now, her hands trembling. I didn't mean to, Ada. I swear I didn't mean for this to happen. I love him. I would never hurt him. But Ada wasn't listening. She was already running to her car, clutching Kamsi tightly against her chest. His small face was pale, and he wasn't crying. He wasn't making any sound at all. The emergency room was a whirlwind of activity. Nurses rushed to take Kamsi from Ada's arm, placing him on a stretcher and wheeling him away before she could even process what was happening. Ada tried to follow, but a nurse stopped her gently. Please wait here, ma'am. The doctors will do everything they can. But he's my baby, Ada said, her voice trembling. I need to be with him. I know, the nurse said softly, but you have to let us help him now. Ada collapsed into a chair, her hands gripping the edge so tightly that her knuckles turned white. Chike arrived moments later, his face pale with worry. He sat beside her and held her hand, but neither of them spoke. Minutes felt like hours as they waited, the silence broken only by the occasional sound of a door opening or a nurse walking by. Mama Ada arrived shortly after, her eyes red from crying. She limped over to Ada and knelt in front of her. Ada, I'm so sorry, she whispered. I didn't mean for this to happen. Please forgive me. Ada didn't look at her. She couldn't. Her mind was racing, filled with fear and anger. She wanted to scream, to cry, to lash out, but all she could do was sit there, waiting for someone to tell her that Kamsi was okay. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, a doctor walked out of the operating room. His face was grave, and Ada's heart sank. Mr. and Mrs. Nnaji, the doctor began, his voice heavy. Your son suffered a serious head injury. We did everything we could to stabilize him, but his condition is critical. We are doing our best to save him, but I need you to prepare for the possibility that he might not make it. The word hit Ada like a punch to her chest. She felt Chike's hand tighten around her, but it wasn't enough to keep her from breaking. Tears streamed down her face as she buried her head in her hand. This can't be happening, she whispered. Not my baby. Not Kamsi. Mama Ada stood to the side, silent and trembling. She wanted to say something to offer comfort, but there were no words that could fix what had happened. The waiting room was impossibly quiet, yet Ada could hear every small sound, her own ragged breathing, the squeak of nurses' shoes against the floor, the distant beeping of monitors in the emergency ward. Chike sat beside her, gripping her hands tightly, though his own hand was trembling. Mama Ada was seated a little further away, her shoulders hunched and her hands clasped tightly as if in prayers. Every second stretched like an eternity. Ada's thoughts swirled in a chaotic mess, torn between desperate hope and paralyzing fear. She kept replaying the scene in the bathroom in her head, wondering if there had been something she could have done, something that could have stopped this from happening. Finally, the doctor emerged from the operating room. His face grim, Ada's stomach churned, and she immediately stood up, her knees weak and threatening to give out. Mr. and Mrs. Nnaji, the doctor said, his tone measured but heavy with sorrow. He paused, as if searching for the right words, but there were no right word for this. I'm sorry, your son didn't make it. Ada's heart stopped. For a moment, the world seemed to tilt on its axis. She stared at the doctor, her mind refusing to process the word. What? She whispered, her voice breaking. What do you mean? He was fine this morning. He was fine. Chike wrapped his arm around her as she collapsed into him, her body shaking with sobs. No, 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 she repeated, her voice muffled against his chest. This can't be real. Not my Kansi, not my baby. Chike was crying too, though his tears were silent, his body stiff as he tried to hold himself together for her. Mama Ada let out a wail, rolling on the floor, covering her face as she fell on the ground. It's my fault, she cried. I dropped him. I didn't mean to, but I dropped him. Her words pierced through Ada's grief like a knife. She pulled away from Chike, turning to face her mother. You, she said, her voice trembling with rage. I told you not to beat him. I told you to stop all those things you were doing, but you didn't listen. You never listened. Mama Ada sobbed harder, shaking her head. I was only trying to help, she whispered. I didn't want this. I love him too. He's my grandson. Ada felt her chest tighten with anger and despair. Love? If you love him, you would have listened to me. But now he's gone. He's gone, Mama. Chike stopped between them. His voice soft but firm. Ada, this isn't the time, he said. Let's go home. But Ada couldn't move. Her legs felt like they were made of lead. Her mind drowning in the unbearable reality that her son, her miracle Kamsi, was gone. As days turned into weeks, Ada found herself thinking more and more about the events that had led to Kamsi's death. She thought about the massages, the balm, the tossing in the air, all the practices her mother had insisted on despite her protest. Growing up, Ada had always been taught to respect her elders, to trust in their wisdom and experience. Mama Ada had always said that tradition was what kept their family strong, what connected them to their roots. But now, Ada couldn't help but wonder if some traditions were better left in the past. One evening, she sat in the living room with a notebook and began to write. She wrote about Kamsi, about his short but precious life. She wrote about the joy he had brought to her and Chike and the pain of losing him. And she wrote about the traditions that had contributed to his death, the practices that her mother had clung to, even when they didn't make sense anymore. As she wrote, Ada felt a strange sense of clarity. She realized that her mother hadn't acted out of malice. Her mother had only been doing what she believed was best, what she had been taught by her own mother and grandmother. But that didn't excuse what had happened. It didn't mean that Ada had to accept those traditions blindly, or that other young mothers had to suffer the same way. The next day, Ada walked into the guest room where her mother was sitting quietly, staring out the window. Mama, she said softly. Her mother turned to her, her eyes red and tired. Ada, she said, I'm so sorry. I don't know how to make this right. You can't make it right, Mama, Ada said. But we can make sure it doesn't happen to anyone else. Mama Ada looked at her, confused. What do you mean? I mean, we need to talk about these traditions, Ada said. We need to educate people about what's safe and what isn't. We can't keep doing things just because it's how they've always been done. Mama Ada nodded slowly, her eyes filled with tears. You are right, she said. I didn't know any better, Ada, but I want to learn. I want to help. And for the first time since Kamsi's death, Ada felt a small glimmer of hope. One evening, Ada decided to share her story on social media. She hesitated before hitting the post button, unsure if anyone could care or understand. But within hours, her inbox was flooded with messages. Women from all over the world shared their experiences, their struggles, and their gratitude. Some told her they had faced similar battles with their family tradition, while others said her story made them think differently about their own parenting choices. Encouraged by the response, Ada began to organize small workshops in her community. She invited mothers, grandmothers, and even fathers to talk about the balance between tradition and modern parenting. She brought in medical professionals to explain the science behind newborn care, emphasizing that not all traditions were harmful, but some needed to be reevaluated. The road to reconciliation wasn't easy. Ada and her mother had to navigate a minefield of emotions, guilt, anger, sadness, but with time and effort, they found a way to meet in the middle. One evening, as they sat on the couch, watching the sunset, Mama Ada finally spoke, the words Ada had been longing to hear. "Ada, you were right," she said softly. "I should have listened to you. I didn't mean to hurt you or Kamsi, but I see now that I was wrong." Ada felt tears well up in her eyes. For so long, she had carried the weight of anger and blame, but hearing her mother's acknowledgement lifted a burden she didn't even realize she was still holding. "I forgive you, Mama," she said, her voice trembling. "I know you didn't mean to hurt him, and I know you loved him as much as I did." They embraced, their tears mingling with the warm evening air. For the first time in months, Ada felt a sense of peace. Months turned into a year, and though the pain of losing Kamsi never fully went away, Ada and Chike began to heal. They decided to try for another child, and this time, they approached the journey with cautious hope. When Ada found out she was pregnant again, she was filled with both joy and fear. Every step of the pregnancy felt like walking a tightrope, but she reminded herself that she had learned from the past. She trusted her instincts more than ever and was firm in setting boundaries, even with her mother. When their daughter Amarachi was born, Ada held her close, her heart swelling with love and gratitude. Mama Ada, now more cautious and respectful, waited for Ada's permission before holding the baby. "I will do things your way," Mama Ada said with a gentle smile. "But if you ever need me, I'm here." Not all traditions are harmful. Some carry the wisdom and love of generations before. In Ada's home, certain traditions remained as a way to honor her roots and connect with her culture. For example, pepper soup became a staple during her postpartum recovery, a nourishing dish that gave her strength. She also embraced the tradition of storytelling, sitting with her children at night to share folk tales passed down from her mother and grandmother. Ada learned that tradition rooted in love, care, and connection could coexist with modern knowledge. The key was discernment, understanding which practices uplifted and which one needed to evolve. What about you, family? If you were in Ada's shoe, how would you have handled the situations where tradition clashed with modern parenting? How do you decide which tradition to keep and which to let go? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Share your perspective on balancing tradition and safety in parenting. Your voice could help others navigating the same challenges. Thank you so much for the time to hear Ada's story. This is not just one family's experience. It's a conversation we all need to have. Let's work together to create homes where tradition and modernity can coexist. Always prioritize the safety and well-being of our children. If this story resonated with you, share it with others. Start a conversation in your family or community about the traditions you follow and the ones you might need to reconsider. Together, we can honor our past while building a safer, brighter future for our children. Thank you so much for watching, and let's keep the dialogue alive. Don't forget to share this story with your family and your friends whom I love to see them. Till I see you again in my next story. Goodbye.